There is a fifth dimension.
About the unknown.
Beyond that which is known to man.
The Garden of Thought.
The Babylon Project was our last best hope for peace.
Unexplained.
Mythology.
This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call
The Garden of Thought with Jeff Lippman.
Eventually, our sun will grow cold and go out.
You're listening to something much bigger, something hidden in plain sight.
It won't just take us. It'll take Marilyn Monroe and Lao Tzu and Einstein. All of this was for nothing unless we go to the stars.
What you're about to learn will completely change the way you experience your mind, your thoughts, and yourself.
Let's make sure that history never forgets the name.
The Garden of Thought.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Thought, and this week we're joined by Nick Patch of Strange Pages. He's a comic book guy and a bunch of other things, and he's going to talk to us about Lord of the Rings. Well, actually, we're going to talk to each other about Lord of the Rings. Welcome to the show, Nick. You're on mute, my man.
Hey, how's it going? It's good to be here.
Good. Yeah, this podcast thing with all tech is tricky. So yeah, tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
So I've kind of gone through doing comics and doing short films, that whole kind of thing, and back to doing some comics and just all around story structure. I think story is very important to culture and to developing the way we think and asking important questions and that sort of thing. That's what I'm all about. So whether it's comics or movies or TV, even video games, I'm all into story.
Well, one of the first modern epics is The Lord of the Rings. I mean, and there's other companion books, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, which no one really understands the Silmarillion, and people spend their entire lives studying it like it's the Torah or the Kabbalah or something. I did manage to find a cheat video on it, and so I have a fairly good idea as to what it means, at least up until Lord of the Rings. I have to confess it was a little dull, but basically Tolkien created a cosmology. He created a creation myth with a creator god and a origin of the world, which included a flood, which got rid of a continent that, you may or may not be like a Atlantis type of utopia or whatnot, and explain where the different lands were and why some of them are barely mentioned in The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and why others aren't. It tells us so when we hear names and words like Numenor and the Dark Lands and the Western Lands, that's mostly where that is from. But I think my first introduction to Lord of the Rings was probably through so many people comparing Star Wars to Lord of the Rings. And then there were some 1970s movies, which were actually cartoons, and some of them had live actors, and they sort of animated over the live actors, which was sort of interesting and sort of cheating. And then, of course, I read the books a bunch of times as a youth.
Yeah.
And saw the movies, and then I saw them again with my kids, and I saw them again in preparation for this show. So I should be pretty fresh on it. But one of the things I thought and keep hearing is that it's just a rehash of the Bible. And while I can see that, and while I thought it, after watching The Lord of the Rings more and knowing more about the Bible and other sort of comparative mythologies more, I don't think it really is. I mean, the end point might be the same, good over evil, the lamb might set you free, and support the lamb kind of thing. But I don't think it's exactly a rehashing of the Bible. I could be wrong. I don't even know if you want to touch on any of that. But yeah, why don't you tell us your Lord of the Rings or Tolkien sort of introduction and story?
Yeah, so I am young enough that I was 5 when the Fellowship came out, and the film. And I remember I was living with my dad in my grandparents' basement at the time. And he got the VHS of it, and I was 5 watching Fellowship of the Ring. And I didn't quite understand that movies were things that were being made. I thought they just were things that existed.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, so when my dad got the second one, I didn't realize, this just came out.
Right.
I just thought, so here's the next one. Yeah, glad we found that one.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it had been made.
Why do I have to wait a year, Dad, for the final?
Yeah, and why didn't you get number 2 when you're at the store? What's going on?
Yeah, why are you holding out on me?
I just thought these things existed.
Well, you're a kid.
Well, I thought when someone died in a movie, they died.
Right. They don't? Well,
Did you ever have that?
Probably. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, probably. Maybe. I think that I sort of understood the difference between death in a movie and death on regular TV, but I couldn't say that with any certainty. I have my own psychoses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I remember. So one of mine is when I was young, someone died in a movie. They died in real life. They did that for the movie. And so I remember seeing Boromir in, I can't remember what it was, the actor for Boromir. He ended up in something else. And I thought, this one must have been done before they did Lord of the Rings.
Right.
That's what I thought.
Well, yeah, until Lord of the Rings. Yeah, Sean Bean was definitely one of those guys that you've seen him a bunch of times. You can't exactly place where, now of course he's Ned Stark, and it'll probably always be Ned Stark. Even though he was only on for, 9 episodes in season 1, but still, iconic role. I'm sure he wished he could have negotiated that contract. But anyway, yeah. So
I know we're here to talk about Lord of the Rings, but Game of Thrones, at least the first few seasons, are really good, and he's really good as Ned Stark. So.
Oh yeah, the first few seasons are great. It's just when the original creative team sort of leaves. I mean, they also, were dangling by a thread because George R.R. Martin sort of left them. He was done writing and sort of left the advisory role to pursue other projects. And so that probably is part of the reason why they left. And then other people tried to pick it up and, come up with whatever they thought the story should be. And, in my opinion, it's not at all what the story is. But yeah, I mean, one of the other problems with Game of Thrones, and I've said this so many times in the show that the audience is probably tired, but I mean, I was closer to conclusion at the end of page 1, at the end of, page 5,500 after 5 books. And it's been, 11 years or 15 years since he wrote the last book. So it's just like, at this point, unless he's 95% done with the 6th book and the 6th book is the final book, I'm not interested. I'm done. I'm all set. I don't remember who the characters are. I don't really care. House of Dragons sucks. I don't care what anyone says. And then I go back and
I like half of it.
Well, sure, but
just throw that in there.
But
half of it.
Yeah, but half isn't good enough for what's supposed to be an epic series. I mean, if you only like half of a show, you probably don't like a show. I mean, it's not like a Jason Statham action movie where you're only expecting to like half of it. This is an emotional, maybe it's just a me problem, but Game of Thrones is when you read all of that, you're invested. So to only half of it is That's a fail. That's 50%. 65 is a D. I mean, give me at least C plus B minus, but I'm really looking for basically A content, or at least content I can rationalize as A. I mean, or at least like don't be a dummy and change it that Jon Snow was not the bastard son of Robert Baratheon that Ned Stark was protecting. I mean, you could do what you want with the mom, but obviously Jon Snow is the rightful heir under the Seven Kingdoms, and unless you go with the Targaryen, that's should be the final conflict, or them unifying and then going after the White Walkers in a very different way than the way they sort of did. It, got all incesty and bizarre.
I have a few things to say. The why Game of Thrones went the way it did before we actually talk about why we're here. But what it was for me, it's a perfect example of what happened with the entire show. Is Dan and Dave were in a hotel room with George, and George told them, among other things, reveals they're supposed to have, the way that characters' arcs are supposed to come to a head. One of the things he had said was that the Hound was meant to die in fire, killing his brother. And so the reason that makes sense is because he's afraid of fire. He's afraid of his brother. And so what he needs to do is force himself and his brother into fire, facing his fear of fire and killing his brother to save whoever it was. I don't know if he specifically was meant to save Arya from George's perspective or whatever. But what they ended up doing is he tackled his brother and fell through a wall and fell down a tower into a bunch of fire.
Right.
So it's not what George meant when he said he's supposed to die in fire. Right.
I also don't think
he was supposed to be facing his fear of fire.
Yeah, and I also don't think that his brother was supposed to be like a reanimated sort of like zombie Frankenstein thing.
Yeah, it takes the meaning out of the exchange to have him not really be himself.
Right.
Yeah, so I agree with that as well. So I think that's a perfect way to sum up what happened with the entire show.
Yeah.
I think you could do that with everything that happened. Oh, yeah, Daenerys is supposed to go crazy and then burn half of King's Landing. And they're like, oh, so that's a thing that's supposed to happen, so just do that thing. Doesn't need to make sense. We don't have to do any work to make it make sense. We'll just do it in slow motion or something, and then people will think it's dramatic. Yeah, that's my big thing. I think they lacked understanding, and as George was gone and the examples in the books started to fade and they started getting ahead of the books, they were in over their heads. They had no idea what actually made this show good.
Yeah.
They had no idea, in my opinion, Dan and Dave.
Yeah.
So that's what I think happened with it.
And I actually don't mind this. First of all,
no, Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson.
Oh yeah, no, he was extremely true to it. But Game of the Thrones is very Tolkienian, even to the point where there's traitors among the ranks. You've got a hideous, what seemingly endless army of monsters from the north, but you also have enemies in the south, and then others coming from other mysterious coasts and things like that. Watching it the most recent time around, from my 57-something self, there were certain little persnickety things that I'm like, wait, that doesn't make, why is this happening? Like, for instance, when they go into the caves of Mordia or whatever, and, the elf Legolas pulls out a arrow from the dead bodies of the carcasses of a dwarf and says, goblins. And I'm like, okay, but everyone that's in there is an orc. I'm like, why weren't they goblins? I think, why is everyone happy to see Lord Arwen, even though the elves abandoned Gondor? and they're just like quietly, going out to like spa music, walking in slow motion to leave the land. It's like, before you leave, you think you can help us out with like this apocalypse or something, but you just sort of show up and not show up whenever you want. Oh, you brought a sword. Cool. I mean, so persnickety things like that, but my rant is over because Lord of the Rings otherwise is basically perfect as far as I'm concerned. And I think the movies, they did about as good a job as you can do with something this epical, giving it a good amount of time, but without going like crazy overboard. Like it's basically 10 or 11 hours worth of movies. So, and you know, I'm not counting The Hobbit, but yeah, take it from here. You're the guest, so let's hear what you've got to say.
I do have a question just to wonder, do you consider the theatrical the definitive cut or the extended to be the definitive cut?
I don't watch extended cuts. I don't have patience for that. So I cannot.
I love the extended cut.
See, I can't make that comparison because and it probably is going to be a good 5 to 10 years before I try to tackle these 3 movies again, if at all, maybe with grandchildren or something. But maybe then I'll watch the extended cuts because kids, either they can't sit through a movie or it doesn't matter how long it is. They'll sit through it forever. And hopefully any kid that's one that has my DNA in it falls into the latter category. But yeah,
especially with Lord of the Rings.
But feel free to
it's about quality.
Yeah, but feel free to point out things that were in the edited cuts that change or supplement or enhance the storyline. But for anyone who doesn't know, why don't you just give a broad arc of what the story of Lord of the Rings is about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Lord of the Rings is set in a world where there is a lot of hardships and a lot of kingdoms that have been kind of fractured and they're obviously, it's a world with elves who are practically immortal and dwarves who are short, stout, but really strong people who tend to keep to the mines and love their gold. And then there's the Shire folk, the hobbits, who I think obviously Tolkien was trying to, and he said it, he wanted a mythology to tie Europe back together. And he thought that this was the way to do it. And I think that the hobbits, these small little people who love to grow food and eat and make merry and drink and smoke their pipe weed, that's a specific group of people in England, in Great Britain, where they wanted to keep to themselves and be peaceful, but the barbarians will come knocking at the door if you don't take care of them. So basically, at the beginning, that's where we're at. Is things are fairly peaceful, but then there's an awakening, and Sauron, who was long defeated, is reawakened. He's building armies. He's even recruited a really strong wizard to help him. He's been bringing men in to the picture. I believe that it's south, I believe.
Yeah, there's wild men from all over the place, apparently, that are just no good.
Obviously, a good wizard who saw his bad wizard Saruman as a mentor, he sees him fall to the evil. He has to encourage Frodo, a hobbit from the Shire, to take the ring, which holds the power that Sauron, who's returned, needs in order to basically achieve his ends and bring in the age of the orc and defeat men.
Yeah,
and he tasks Frodo to take it to the place where it was forged, which is the only fires hot enough at Mount Doom, a volcano, basically. And he has to throw it in. And it's 3 movies. If you're watching the extended cuts, it's 12 hours of just amazing story with a lot of characters and a lot of plot lines that all come together and interweave. And I would say thematic resonance is very powerful in this set of movies as well. But that's kind of like what's happening without any, spoilers. If you haven't seen it, that's kind of what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of bizarre to, say no spoilers about.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, I think these are pretty safely. I mean, the story itself has got to be in the public domain. These particular movies aren't, but in the way of Star Wars, it is sort of like the Empire had allies and was building up their forces even before people knew they were building up their forces. That's sort of the Saruman thing. Some of the people who you were friends are enemies. They had a hidden fleet. Sauron apparently needs the ring to not just take the power, but to take a physical form on the earth so that he could rule as king. The backstory is that whoever the wise were, they made a bunch of rings, almost like the Infinity Stones or whatnot. And they made rings. It's very Norse, which is why I didn't mind at all Game of Thrones, because they're sort of similar. A lot of numbers. And apparently he gave 3 rings, I think, to the elves. 3 is a very sacred number in lots of biblical things, even predating the Trinity. It's like supposed to be the number of truth, and that sort of goes with the elves, sort of like almost being like the angelics. Then 5 to the dwarves, which for the life of me, I can't figure out what that's all about. I also, as a persnickety 57-year-old, even though I said my rant was over, I'm not sure why after the slaughter in Myrdia and Gimli being part of the fellowship, why the dwarves are not helping at all in this thing either. But I do sort of get it, because it is, I guess I'll just use the word biblical in some way, in that it's supposed to be transformative from a state of chaos to a state of men being in control of things versus all of these other monstrous demonic forces, which, I could only say are sort of nature gone amok or nature tinkered with by evil. Because there's definitely a pastoral favoritism in the way the hobbits live a very simple pastoral life, the Ents who protect the trees. But anyway, they also gave 9 rings to men, which is also a repeat number in there. But he, in secret, meaning Sauron, made 1 ring to rule them all for himself. There was some war. A human, sort of almost by accident, by reflex, managed to cut Sauron's ring finger off. And once the ring was off, he turned to dust because he can't maintain his form. And that allowed the humans and elves who were in alliance at the time, along with some other creatures, I suppose, to get rid of the ring. But instead of getting rid of the ring, the humans kept it for themselves because man is only interested in power, which I don't know how that's much different than the dwarves were only interested in their gold in the mines, but I guess they're not hurting anyone else because they're in the mines. But during the course of trying to hoard the ring, other men get involved in it, and the ring gets lost, and it's eventually found by another hobbit named Smeagol, who sort of deteriorates in isolation, being obsessed over his ring, and turns into a creature called Gollum. And Frodo's uncle, Bilbo, is actually tasked originally with doing a mission for Gandalf, something to do with dwarves who were very invested at the time. And Bilbo finds the ring. I don't know if that was part of Gandalf's endgame or if it was just a bad accident or not. But that's sort of why Frodo's involved, is because Bilbo still has the ring. And part of the thing is everybody seems to want the ring, except for Sam Gamgee. Samwise seems to be the only one that's like, take the ring back. I don't want it. And so, but, I guess that's the lust for power kind of thing personified. But I think I've done enough backstory and I've, taken it from you. But that I think is like the biblical or the mythology part of it is like all mythology sort of go from gods to demigods, and then there's monsters, to an age of heroes, and then to an age of man. And I think this is maybe sort of akin to like, sort of the Greek age of heroes, where there's demigods, there are humans, but there's also like Medusa and sea monsters and dragons and, centaurs and things like that. So, that's the best way I think I can put it anyhow.
Yeah, the monsters have yet to be defeated. As you could say, we've moved now into Tolkien's time where you'd consider that the monsters are gone from the world. We've gotten rid of all of them. The time where this takes place is very much more medieval, where you would say monsters still do exist, and so do demigods, half-elf people, and elves still. I do think it makes sense that the dwarves are just uninvolved. They accept Gimli, but they're so up in their own greed, and we saw that in the Mines of Moria, that they dug so deep and greedily, I believe is the term that Gandalf says. They're wiped out because of what they found, and they're all dead now. And one, maybe there's not as many dwarves as there used to be, but two, the ones that are still around are, again, just so focused on their own greed and trying to find and hoard riches in the mountains. And they might believe that they're untouchable.
Yeah, they didn't even know that their kin were. They didn't even know that their kin were genocided. I mean, they had no.
Didn't know. Yeah.
You know what? I think you're right. I mean, you're right. And it fits within my thing, except that I guess the dwarves, at some point might have been the men of the past, but there's no hope left for the dwarves. They are already, their lust for power is just signified on gold, almost like Gollum was in love with the ring. Men only lust for power, but I guess some of the old ones have not quite given up on the man to elevate to a more spiritual, better path. Men still have the free will, which is why there's evil men and good men and a lot of the sort of in the middle. So that makes sense for the dwarves. Obviously I wanted the Avengers to assemble. I wanted the dwarves to be there. I wanted the eagles to be there. We had a Lord of the Horses. What are the rest of the horses doing? But anyway, take that aside out of it. I think you're 100% right.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be cool to see that kind of thing. Almost like this is like all BS from the Hobbit movies, but the battle and orcs come in and the elves show up, and there's this whole big battle, and the orcs are there, and it's this whole big thing that in the movies is completely contrived and doesn't happen in the books. But I really wish that movie series, I suppose, that trilogy had been a single movie. I think it would have benefited immensely from it, and I think that, they still would have made money. Maybe not 3 times as much money, but they still would have made money, and it would be better. Someone out there, I can't remember who or what it's called, they made a cut of the movie. So they took the Hobbit trilogy, the movies, and cut it down into one film. Trimmed a bunch of plot lines up and all this kind of a thing. The White Orc isn't in it because that was just made up. There's all kinds of stuff that made up for the Hobbit trilogy that wasn't even made up by Peter Jackson. I think if Peter Jackson had been the one writing it, it would have been a lot more focused and it would have been a lot better. Where someone else wrote it, and I believe Guillermo del Toro was going to direct these, and he dropped out, and they needed someone last minute, and Peter Jackson reluctantly accepted the job because even if he thinks it's going to be a disaster, maybe it'll at least be a little bit less of a disaster if he's the one at the helm. But needless to say, I think that the story of The Hobbit is very important to the world building of The Lord of the Rings, and it shows you a lot about the dwarves and about Gandalf, and it's the only time we see a dragon. It's almost like it's the last dragon. So these giant monsters are starting to work themselves out. We're starting to get rid of them, and coming into Bilbo's nephew's generation, the monster, there are still monsters, but the ones left are not these behemoths. They're still real and dangerous, but we've gotten rid of the really big ones, and now it's about the multitude of small ones we have to deal with. And obviously I'm kind of rambling, but I'm not like in a straight direction, but I think it's important to note just how well thought out and planned this was. Tolkien talked about writing, and he said, you almost have to write it backwards as well as you're writing it forwards. Because he rewrote it many times, the story, because it didn't come to the dramatic, cohesive ending conclusion that he wanted it to be. And he would work through it backwards, and then forwards and backwards and forwards until everything was perfect, almost as though you have to look at it from a fourth dimensional perspective. You have to understand the inner workings and how everything affects each other backwards and forwards, which is really interesting take on writing that Tolkien had. And yeah, he was super religious Christian, and he obviously, I don't think I'm saying anything new by saying that he turned C.S. Lewis into a hardcore Christian from their talks on writing.
Yeah, they were very close as well. And it's not a coincidence that the two get parallel. I have a very intelligent friend who says that Tolkien wrote this as a response to the horrors of World War I and the Industrial Revolution. And there's definitely some of that in there. But I think to ignore the religious aspect of it is either you don't want to because you're afraid that it's controversial, or that you yourself are so religious that you don't see it as a religious thought train. You just see it as the train. But there's definitely that. I mean, the whole thing where the tree guardians, they didn't want to get involved at all, and then all of a sudden they saw the desolation that the Saruman and the tower were creating to light their fires, where they sort of created this new kind of orc. Apparently the orcs can only move in the dark or underground. So they created this new kind of being called an Urukwai, which I'm not exactly sure what they were, how they were doing it. I thought at some point it was like half orc, half goblin, but the goblins are underground as well. And they're like, and one of them has fallen out.
They were half man, half orc or something.
See, that makes sense, but I didn't, all of the men I saw him importing, they were to go to war. It's not like we saw people in chains being thrown into these pits. But anyway, whatever they were doing, they were Frankensteining these things up so that they had almost unlimited energy. They were stronger, they were bigger, but most importantly, they could travel during the day and night, didn't really need sleep, and they sort of looked like the Predator. And so, that sort of changes the nature of warfare, that it can be 24/7, all year round, or however long a day is in Middle Earth. I mean, one of my favorite parts is when, the hobbits are like, are we stopping for breakfast? And like, you already had breakfast. Not second breakfast. What about 11sies? What about lunch? What about 2 o'clock lunch? What about tea? It's like these little hobbits, like these little, they apparently have like 10 meals, like their whole lives are just like, and I don't know I have no idea if J.R.R. Tolkien was a socialist or a communist or not, but it seemed like their entire worlds were very, very simple, and everybody was sort of provided for, in some sort of way, shape, or form, or they didn't need very much to do it. Though Merry and Pippin did steal from the farmer, but it seemed like they did that more as a prank than as a need. So it almost seemed like they were just being kids like toilet paper in a house when they were stealing, as opposed to like, oh no, we're going to go hungry without these carrots. So I don't know. You probably know more about Tolkien than I do, but I don't know if that played a part in any of it, or I'm just stretching.
Oh, as far as his politics, I'm not positive, though. I doubt that he was communist. I do find it funny that they're just consuming. They're just as consumption machines, the hobbits. We want to smoke our pipe weed, and we want to drink our mead, and well, that comes in pints. I want a pint. And 11sies and their whole laundry list of different meals they're supposed to have throughout the day, and if they miss one, it's awful. They're just they love to consume, and they're simple. But in the movies it's different, but in the books there's the scourge of the Shire, where they come back and like it's been, I don't know if it was wiped out completely, but there had been war on the Shire, which is incredibly tragic, but it's from Tolkien's mindset. It's because they refused to face the outside world and reality and just retreated in their little hidey holes, but someone's going to find you in that hole.
Right.
Eventually. And I think that whether it was purposeful, I as far as he's concerned, he says there's no allegory to anything. The ring as drugs, they say, people say, the whole thing is to World War I and World War II. I don't think he did it purposefully, though. What you are fed, what your conscious mind feeds your subconscious mind, your subconscious mind will output into action and dreams, and it'll affect your writing. And so whether he did it on purpose or not, like, it's clearly there's a lot of similarities to draw, just like you were talking about with the Ents not wanting to get involved. It's like it until that's kind of what happened with the wars, is no one wanted to get involved until it was at their doorstep.
Right.
And so when Saruman, they found that Saruman had burned down trees, this is now their fight.
But through the goodness of the Fellowship and Aragorn, they sort of overcame that. But I think that the push that really did it was actually, that squadron or that legion of elves that came to honor the old allegiance that went to Helm's Deep.
Oh yeah. Oh, it would have been over at that point.
But I also think that reminded the King of Rohan. I'm sorry, I forget his name, but that even if we're going to lose, we have to band together, however inconvenient or whatever, we have to rise above. And that's sort of what the Fellowship was. I think Faramir sort of figured that out towards the end before he not died. I mean, I didn't like sort of the repeat story between the King of Rohan being influenced by, an advisor, a vizier that had been corrupted by Saruman. That part I didn't mind, but then sort of like the regent of Gondor was also sort of losing his mind, and I know that was more like Shakespearean. It was over the death of his child, and, he was so lost his mind, but it felt like the same story in two different movies.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think he cared less about the death of his child, in my opinion. I think he felt his family had been kind of in charge. They're basically kings.
Right. The loss of
the King of Gondor, he basically is. Yeah.
Well, I think that definitely was part of it. I think losing Boromir to this cause broke him.
Boromir died, and that hurts him. But he still had another son who was willing to do anything.
But he clearly didn't care anymore about the other son very much. I mean, until the very end, when he's literally.
I do just see him as a man generally.
Yeah. This is probably something to do. And it's one of my favorite little things, which is definitely not a coincidence, but this is George Lucas pulling it out of the Lord of the Rings, and really the entire Silmarillion, the entire Middle Earth, or Numenor, whatever the full name of the world was, because there are two places in Star Wars, Andor and Endor, which are both places in Middle Earth, or the entire planet. I forget what, but apparently at some point the world they were on was actually flat. And then when the creator got angry at people about something and created the flood. He actually turned it into a round earth. And that's why, you almost like the Tower of Babel and then separated the lands from each other and things of that nature. So I would love to tell people they should read the Silmarillion, but I don't know that anybody who read the Silmarillion just once understand it. And I can assure you, listen, I was probably 11 to 15 when I tried to read it 2 or 3 times, and I certainly didn't understand it, and maybe my teenage brain couldn't comprehend it, but I still hear people say nobody understands it. So maybe seek out that cheap video that I found on YouTube and do better than me and make it through the full hour and not just a half hour. But it is interesting. It's not just that it was, it doesn't matter. Enough about that side note. But, Andor and Endor, both places, in the Middle Earth realm that, make it part of the Star Wars universe. And I bet that there's others too.
That's interesting. As far as that I know, and this is an interesting thing to me, the kind of connections, in like people, who's inspired by who, and are people stealing things from other people. But, it's funny. So, there's rumors, I don't know how founded it is, but this seems to be the case, that George Lucas was inspired by a script for Dune that had not been picked up, that someone had, some studio had purchased it, but did not do anything with it. And he came across it and was inspired by it, to do Star Wars. And what's interesting to me about that is that the guy who wrote Dune, forgive me, I don't know his name.
Frank Herbert.
Frank Herbert sent a copy of it to Tolkien. Tolkien, what do you think about this? Because he respected Tolkien. Tolkien said, I have nothing nice to say, so I'm not going to say anything at all.
Wow.
He absolutely hated it. So it's interesting to me that we can draw these similarities between Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, where Star Wars was inspired by, it seems, Dune, which Tolkien really didn't like. But still, there's these similarities between all of them. And that could just be, in the air. Everyone had been fed the same things at that time, in feeding into their subconscious minds, which I would say, that the wars had just happened. We're coming out of that now, and we have all of the same propaganda being fed, or even just normal news that's not propaganda, but like everyone's getting the same kind of collective consciousness fed into their subconscious, and then they output things that have similarities to them because of that, even if perhaps there was no inspiration between them. It's still interesting to see that. I never really saw many similarities between Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, but as you draw them, I do see it.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is accurate or not. I have no idea, but I feel like Lord of the Rings might have been the first fictional epic work on anything near this kind of scale where the end of the story was basically, and they lived happily ever after. Or at least that's where we get left off. Like, everything's been resolved. The Aragorn is the king. He gets married to his girl. The hobbits go home. The age of man is now there. The elves get to go to, whatever the first level of heaven or wherever they're going, to the Outer Rim, like Babylon 5. Before that, everyone thinks that all fairy tales ended with happily ever after. No, that was a Disney thing. I mean, most fairy tales ended hideously. Greek comedies aren't called comedies because they're funny. It's just because they sort of work out well. Tragedies, they end badly, but it's not like happily ever after. Usually something terrible happens to get there. Most mythologies, they're trying to tell you about the cycle. It sort of never ends. And that's, again, why I go biblical, because if you put the testaments together, at the end you have, revelations, but then you're supposed to get 1,000 years of peace. Now, of course, after 1,000 years of peace, then there's another problem. But, I don't think it's a coincidence that everything was in thousands here. You know, the first war against Sauron was 3,000 years ago or something like that. And, you know, everything's sort of like 1,000 years. And, you know, Game of Thrones took that too. They're like, you know, but they even made it longer, that the wall has been there for 10,000 years and this, that, and the other thing. But I'm not sure if there were many or any, like, and they live happily ever after before that on any scale, really.
Yeah, if you look at all the things, the fairy tales that we've taken and twisted, if you look at their roots and the original writings of them, they're generally cautionary tales where it's not a happy ending. It's quite the opposite case.
Right. It's like kids don't go into the woods, you know, or come home before dark, you know, kind of stuff. Or, you know,
you'll be eaten.
Right. Don't worry about all that rot. Just carry some rose petals around so you smell it. Or, hey, yeah, we know that, you know, you were excited about getting 4 or 5 brothers and sisters, but 4 of them died and your mother died, and then your second stepmother died. But don't worry, that's because, you know, the demoness owl took them and took mom also. And then second mom and third mom. So yeah, it's funny because you said that all the stories that we twisted, it's like, we sort of untwisted them. You know, I think there might be, yeah, I think that we might be like, there might be big business in like retwisting them and like turning them into like, you know, A24, you know, style horror movies now.
Yeah. That's interesting. You bring up A24. I'm starting to be sad about A24 because they started out doing these little indie picks, and they've now kind of, now they're like, well, now all of our movies have 5 A-list actors that everybody knows, and I'm just like, gosh, guys, you used to be picking up little indie projects that no one else would have bought distribution, given distribution, and now you're just like everyone else. But that's just a side note. The Witch is fantastic. Hereditary's not. A little side note. Back to Lord of the Rings, though. I find it really interesting that it does have a happy ending, though it's really dark throughout.
Right.
And there's a lot of injury.
Right. And any reasonable person would have given up and succumbed. I mean, like, everyone we know would have given up, and succumbed.
Gravitate toward.
Yeah. But that's sort of the goodness of the hobbits, the sound, you know, the wisdom of Gandalf. I mean, he had power, but his wisdom was like, death is just another journey. You know, the righteousness of Aragorn, who was raised right and upright and strong and brave, even enough to hide his royal line, you know, for whatever reasons. But the hobbits were sort of the pastoral simpleness, you know, almost like how sometimes we romanticize, you know, certain indigenous peoples, or like, well, we might talk about, and I'm sorry if there's like, you know, Amish people or Quakers or whatever listening and, you know, take this the wrong way. But like some people like, you know, romanticize that lifestyle. Like, oh, it's so simple. They're all so happy. And maybe they are. I don't know. But, you know, I think sort of the hobbits were sort of.
Any Amish people are listening to this.
No, I fear you're right.
They don't have the tech.
That's right. Hey, listen, if you're mad and you're listening, you're still listening. So anyway, no offense. But
yeah, it's all in good fun, guys.
Exactly right.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the indigenous people being romanticized, because for, not to plug or anything, but for Roy Beckwith, the comic book that we just had a successful campaign for, and I'm currently almost done with issue 2. I did a lot of research into the frontier, the American frontier, and into what we used to call the Indians. Now it's passé. We're not allowed to say that for whatever reason. They, like a lot of them, if you read any biographies, there's this one. It's about Kit Carson, who was a mountain man, and he very early in his life, because of traveling as a young boy through the frontier with the mountain men, he learned that not all Indians are Indians. You can't treat them that way. One tribe may trade with you, drink with you, have a party with you. Another tribe might see you, kill you, and take all your stuff, like with no aggravation on your part. It's just how they are. So some of them, quite peaceful, often taken advantage of by the other aggressive tribe. That's just interesting. Even Christopher Columbus, there's an account where there's a tribe he was really friendly with, and there's a little boy who he left one day, and he came back. He had to go to a ship and come back. When he came back, there was the boy was missing. And he said, "Where's this little boy? I was excited to see him." And they said, "Oh, he's been taken and eaten by the other tribe over the mountains." And he's like, "What? That's insane. There's no way there are people eating other people. That's crazy." And he sent 3 soldiers over there, and only one came back. And he said, "What happened to the other guys?" They took him and ate him. They ate him. So he said, "I'm going to get rid of that tribe for you, because that, since we've been talking about biblical and Bible and Christianity, that back then it was seen as, when you see something like that, as a Christian, you're meant to take care of that and destroy that evil." And so he took his men and went and wiped out the cannibal tribe so that this peaceful tribe could better prosper. And people think he will die and all of this stuff. And there's just so much romanticism about the indigenous people and villainization of the colonizers, which I'm sure there was some both sides, evil, some good. And I just dislike the whole
and a whole lot of smallpox and other diseases.
They were just this people like the hobbits.
Yeah, no, I mean, the world is complex.
A lot of that was just
it's always been complex.
Them not understanding what.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, people just think that the Indians were like the hobbits. Funnily, they're just all just chilling.
Right, but they also weren't all like Comancheros or whatever, or some were driven to be that. I mean, I think there's at least 500 different Native American languages in the United States, let alone, Canada and whatever. I mean, there's a few language groups, just like there's a few language groups, there's Indo-European, there's Asiatic African, there's Semitic, and there's some isolates and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, no people are a monolith, at all. No people within one tribe are a monolith, or one clan, or one nation, or what have you. But, I know a lot of people who are Native American or First Nations up in Canada. Well, not a lot in Canada. And, they said, we call ourselves Indians. Don't worry about it. But here in the U.S., most might say that between themselves, but you don't say it. And I mean, first of all, there's a place called India. So, I mean, there's that. But anyway, it's not very much trouble for me to say Native American or Indigenous or First Nations. So I do it, because why not? I assume people would show me the same respect if, and then I'm going to show them that respect. It ain't that hard. But, at the same time, I realize I shouldn't use the word Navajo. I should use Dene. And I don't think if I was talking to anyone who wasn't in the Southwest that they would know what the hell I'm talking about. If I said Dene, they'd be what? They'd be like, Navajo. Oh, so, there's always a little.
Actually, what is that? Yeah. Yeah, Dene.
Yeah.
I know. Exactly. I know the Navajo.
Yeah.
I learned that in school growing up.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know what Dene is. Is it? That's what they call themselves.
Yeah, Navajo was an exonym. An acronym. We put that name, like, there's nobody called Eskimos. It's a French word that was basically, for native people in the Arctic. And it's, I guess considered a slur. I mean, the people are Inuit, they're Algonquin, they're Cree, they're Crow, they're Ojibwe, and then probably, 32 other, names of clans, nations. I think they call themselves nations. I don't know, but you try to have that conversation, with the John Q. public, and you're just like, okay, Eskimo, and they know what you're talking about. So it's not, so sometimes you just sometimes you need to be respectful, and sometimes you just need to be able to communicate with the people that you're communicating with. If I'm in a room full of college professors, I'm going to say, if I know the distinction, I'm going to say Inuit or Algonquin. If I'm talking to a high school class, I'm going to say the Eskimos. And if one of the kids or the teacher corrects me, then I'm going to be like, that's great. You guys are way ahead of when I went to school, with dinosaurs and Fred Flintstone, my old best friend. But yeah, you know what? We're getting close to the hour mark. You talked about the comic book, but I don't know that everyone actually, you said you're in comics and you do some indie films. Why don't you talk a little bit about your stuff, your projects? What are you doing? How people can find you and buy stuff and support you and follow you and stuff like that?
So I've decided with doing a Kickstarter that you're not going to be able to buy it after the Kickstarter's over. Because I didn't want to have false urgency. You'll see some people out there in the indie comics space say, "Oh yeah, go get the Kickstarter. There's only 2 days left, so you better go get it." And then 2 days after the Kickstarter ends, they say, "Now you can go hop on GoFundMe or Indiegogo where you can now get it." And so I didn't want to have that kind of fake urgency. So you can't get it until issue 2. That's coming next year. But you can go follow me on @StrangePages on X, and you'll be getting updates, sometimes just little quips about the indie scene or about storytelling as a whole. But the book that I've been doing is a 64-issue series. We just funded issue 1, issue 2 I'm writing the script for, though it is very well planned. It's like I was saying about Tolkien, you kind of have to write it backwards and forwards. So I have a plan for the entire 64 issues, and nice. It's broken down into separate little arcs that get smaller and smaller, but overall feed into the arcs that are slightly bigger, and then those bigger ones feed into the bigger, and all the way up to the whole story, the whole 64 issues. This is called Roy Beckwith and the Cursed Continent, kind of a pulpy title. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade kind of a format, but it's frontier, and it's the Cursed Continent is the American frontier, but it's a little bit more of a twist to it where it is like monsters are still out there, and people are trying to tame these magics of the American frontier, and who's gonna end up with power is one of the big questions of the whole series. There's a lot to the series, but as far as issue 1 and 2, it's about a Roy Beckwith who was in the cavalry and did some bad things to some Native Americans that maybe didn't deserve it while he was in the cavalry. And obviously there's a lot of nuance throughout all of the series that shows, just as we were talking about, no one's a monolith. Some people in the Marshal Service are corrupt and doing bad things, and some are just and trying to do the right thing and that sort of thing. But Roy Beckwith, he's kind of ridden with guilt over what he did for the cavalry, and he's drowning himself in vice, and he wants to make up for it, but doesn't believe he can. And this is the entire arc for him. It's about, can he find the redemption that he's after? As we start, he's being hunted down by someone that he wronged, a Yavapai man that he wronged during the Yavapai Wars, and he's after revenge on Roy, and it's gonna be. It's all about, is Roy going to give in, let him take revenge? Is he going to protect the innocent against someone who is a victim who's now twisted into a villain? and what's the moral nuance and all of that stuff. And it's not just an action comic book. It's about choices and morality and mythology and all of that good stuff.
Is this going to be
get in early with issue 2 next year?
Is this going to be digital? Is it going to be sold in comic book stores, only on your website?
Yes, so it'll be for now only on Kickstarter. You can get it digitally on the Kickstarter or physical copies. Interestingly, I just printed and got the 2,000 copies of issue 1 that have some problems, and we're talking to the printers and may have to reprint all 2,000. But some of them will go into stores, but mainly it'll be the Kickstarters. So
NFTs, basically. Collector's items.
Collector's items. Yeah. I really want to push physical. I don't know why. I know digital is becoming a thing. But I want people to have the book in their hands and it to feel real and of substance, because the story is of substance. So.
And listen, it's your vision. You get to do whatever it is. One suggestion I make is sometimes the artist gets too caught up and just let people buy it and consume it however they're going to buy it. I mean, after all, you have to eat. But that's the first and the last thing I'll say upon it without being asked. All right. Well, that sounds really.
I'm interested to know, but I'm interested in everyone's opinion. I do like that people can read digitally, but I do want people to have it, and maybe that's just me.
No, I know people like you who prefer to read their comics and have them in hands. I have a very difficult time reading anything that's not for work any longer. I'm much better with Audible books. So I'm pretty, I definitely in the past enjoyed the exercise of reading a book more than, flipping pages on a tablet, a Kindle or whatever, iBooks. But then I got used to iBooks and then I realized that, hey, I could go on vacation and have 16 books with me with my tablet and bring it anywhere instead of trying to pack or buy, 3 or 4 books at the airport bookstore or whatever. So, I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion on it. I think it sounds awesome, but I'm going to wait for the 8 seasons of 8 on Netflix to read, because I just don't read anymore. It's just I just don't have time to read. I'm just always booking for shows and doing other sorts of projects. But if I was to enjoy a comic book experience, maybe this is my age, I don't really understand any way to enjoy it other than to hold it in my hand and read it. And I do occasionally still read a graphic novel. Like I've read Sun Superman and House of M and Secret Wars and Watchmen. So there are things I have and I've read. I know that those things are old to most people, but some of them are actually new to me. The MCU sort of reignited some of that. So I'm not hopeless either. But it sounds interesting. I like the story. I like the complexity of it. I like, even though it is a little bit of mythology, I like that, the new world there's still magic. That's sort of a continuing theme that the old gods and the old magic exists and the new people with their new gods are killing them out or their lack of gods are killing them out, whichever way you want to look at it. But their gods are stronger than ours, or their god is stronger than ours. We also have Vikings. We know what the story is. And nothing. If I was to have an outro song, which I will, what would you like the outro song to be that you associate with what we've talked about, or just, what you're feeling right now?
Well, I love Howard Shore's music on The Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you can pull any of that without getting copyright struck. He did really good work on The Fly as well from the 80s with Jeff Goldblum.
Sure, I remember that movie.
If you've seen that.
Sure, the
really
arm wrestling scene where he breaks the guy's arm in half. That's fantastic.
Oh, that was so great. They were rushing that scene, I guess, and they were like, "We got to get this done." And the guy who did the effect was like, "Oh, I don't know that it's gonna land, but it lands. It hurts my brain every time I see it."
It landed. That's back when Gina Davis was new and hot and all of that stuff, and Jeff Goldblum wasn't like basically a meme of Jeff Goldblum yet, but. That happened
the
later.
Fly almost made that meme, almost.
Almost, yeah. I would say Jurassic Park sort of did it, but yeah.
Yeah, but I think Jurassic Park, he was chosen for that because of his role in The Fly as the sort of zany mad scientist. They brought him in. He kind of has that same personality in Jurassic Park, as far as I can tell.
Absolutely, I think in Independence Day too, right?
Yeah, Howard Shore, Lord of the Rings score. That'd be awesome for an outro.
Okay. I don't worry about copyright strikes because it's an outro and the show's not on YouTube. So, but as an outro, like it didn't bring anyone in. It doesn't keep anyone to listening to the show. I mean, most people skip the outro anyway to skip the ads at the end. So, it hasn't happened yet. I should probably know better, but, but it's de minimis, which is fair use. So, so I do know better. That's right, world. Fair use, de minimis. Howard Shore, Lord of the Rings. All right. Got it. All right, sir. Thank you very much. If you want to pitch your stuff one more time, just let them know where it is, and the name of the Kickstarter, or you can send me the link and I'll put them in the show notes, whatever you like.
Yeah, cool. I'll send you a link. Everyone, you can check out that link in the description and follow me on @StrangePages on X. And if you're really interested in the next Kickstarter coming up, hit notifications on my profile because the algorithm is getting harder and harder for us small accounts to grow and get our posts out to even our own followers.
That's true. You're 100% right. And I am also a small account. So if you are here because you are following Nick and you're a fan of his, welcome. Thank you for being on coming to the show. The show is called Garden of Thought. If you just subscribe, it's only on podcasts, but it's on all of the platforms, Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it. You'll generally get 3 shows a week. And at least one will generally be something like this. Another might be a little bit businessy, legally, or realpolitik, but still me. And then the third is generally something special. Sometimes it's a review of a particular TV show. I did a 3-part series on the Netflix show Dark. But the special one I'm really talking about is it started as the Book of Black and it became the Gospel of Thomas, and that's because of the last names of my co-host, PJ Black, who was a professional wrestler for 26 years. Some of you might know him as Justin Gabriel from WWE. In the Nexus part of the John Cena, story as he retires, good old John Cena. And it's and Thomas is Mr. Thomas from MLW Wrestling. There's been some other co-hosts, but we talk to people in wrestling about wrestling, but other things too, like lots of other things. And sometimes we break news, and sometimes we talk nonsense, and sometimes we talk about tip culture and what dishes we hate for Thanksgiving.
For this edition of Garden of Thought right here on Wrestling Soup Friendos, in collaboration with the Sports Jedi Network media family. Tonight we planted the seeds, broke down the psychology, dissected the booking philosophies, and gave you perspective beyond the surface level takes. This isn't just recap culture, this is wrestling discourse. This is nuance. This is the space where fandom meets analysis. Major respect to the entire Wrestling Soup Friendos community for the platform, the energy, and the continued collaboration. And to everyone rocking with the Sports Jedi Network, your support keeps independent wrestling media alive and evolving. If you value thoughtful wrestling conversation, do us a favor, follow Garden of Thought, Wrestling Soups, and Sports Jedi Network on your favorite audio platforms. Hit that like button. Leave those 5-star reviews. They matter more than you think in the algorithm economy. And most importantly, submit your comments. Your takes, your counterpoints, your hot takes, that dialogue fuels the next episode. Independent voices thrive when the community participates. Until next time, stay critical, stay passionate, and keep your thoughts growing. We'll catch you on the next one. May the sports be with you.
You're watching Jedi Sports Network with Kev.